Hi, and welcome to the video on ethics and the principles of good clinical practice, or GCP, and consent. I'm Sophie Weston from Menzies School of Health Research in Darwin, Australia. The objectives of this video is to understand ethical considerations in clinical trials, provide a historical perspective on GCP, define good clinical practice, outline the goals of GCP, and outline informed consent procedures. Why do we need ethical guidelines for clinical trials? Compliance with ethical guidelines and principles provides public assurance that the rights, safety, and well-being of the subjects or participants are protected. And why did this come into being? Historically, the rights, safety, and well-being of participants was not protected. This was evident in the experiments conducted by Nazi physicians in World War II. These were unprecedented in scope and degree of harm and suffering. Medical experiments were performed on thousands of concentration camp prisoners and included deadly studies and torture, all without the consent of the participants, and all without consideration of their rights, safety, and well-being. Following the Nazi experiments in the concentration camps of World War II, in 1946, an American military tribunal opened proceedings against 23 leading physicians of these camps. 16 were found guilty, 7 sentenced to death, and it was the catalyst for the development of the Nuremberg Code of Medical Ethics. The Nuremberg Code of 1947 requires voluntary participation of participants in medical experiments, informed consent of those participants, and a requirement for the minimization of any risk to those participants. The Declaration of Helsinki was developed by the World Medical Association as a statement of ethical principles to provide guidance to physicians and other participants in medical research involving human subjects. The Declaration of Helsinki in 1964 required that the well-being of the subject takes precedence. Respect for persons and protection of participants' health and rights, and also required special protection for vulnerable populations. In another example of medical experiments being performed under the name of medical research, the Tuskegee syphilis study was a long-term study of black males in Alabama from 1930 to 1970. More than 400 African men with syphilis were lied to and denied treatment for more than 40 years. Many people died as a result, infected others with syphilis, and passed congenital syphilis onto their children. Participants were recruited without informed consent and misinformed that some of the procedures done in the interest of research were actually free treatment. The Belmont Report came about after the Tuskegee syphilis study in 1979. The report summarizes ethical principles and guidelines for research involving human subjects. 3 core principles are identified: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. ICH Good Clinical Practice is the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use. And this is a standard for clinical trials. So specific to clinical trials, that provides assurance that results are accurate and the rights, integrity, and confidentiality of trial subjects are protected. The goals of GCP is to protect the rights, safety, and welfare of humans participating in research, to assure the quality, reliability, and integrity of the data collected, and to provide standards and guidelines for the conduct of clinical research. Good clinical practice is ethics plus quality data. The principles of ICH is accordance with ethical principles, so taking in the Declaration of Helsinki into account and ensuring participant rights, safety, and well-being as the most important considerations. Weigh up risk and benefits insofar as benefits must justify the risks of any research in trial subjects. GCP requires scientifically sound research with a clear and precise research protocol. It should be ethically approved by a Human Research Ethical Council approved research protocol, an independent body of reviewers to ensure that the rights and well-being of the subjects in that clinical trial are protected. Medical care and decisions must be made by qualified and experienced medical professionals. Research staff must be qualified, educated, and experienced. Informed consent must be freely given, no coercion, and collected before any trial procedures proceed. Data collection must ensure confidentiality and preserve privacy, and there must be accurate version control, interpretation, verification, and analysis. In medical diagnostics and treatments, handling and storage, and compliance with good manufacturing practices, shipping and cold chain storage, accountability must all be provided, and a systematic approach to the clinical trial in terms of standard operating procedures. So what constitutes good clinical practice in clinical research? You will have your IRB or HREC approved protocol. Valid informed consent from each participant who enrolls into the clinical trial. A monitoring plan for monitoring data and patient safety. Adverse event reporting and serious event reporting, following the guidelines set out. Proper documentation and data collection from the source record documents and in the case record form, and valid data collection and reporting procedures. And who is responsible? Well, almost everybody in the clinical trial. The sponsors and the clinical investigators, the ethics committees to review the protocol, and the IRBs to ensure compliance with the protocol. CROs, research nurses, clinical research coordinators, medical monitors, data entry personnel, and any others who encounter either the trial subject or have access to any trial data.